Not a story of wisdom like that one, but I'm also partial to a little town that's also known for its own unique brand of wisdom. Some of you may have heard of it. Its name is Chelm. And Chelm was known throughout all of the land for being full of wise people. And in Chelm, there was one young woman named Elsie, the daughter of Shmuley the shoemaker, Dorothy the midwife, and perhaps it was that Elsie might have been the wisest of Chelm's women, for Elsie knew the future. So it was that one day as Elsie was sleeping, she thought to herself, here I am now, I'm 15, and I'm young and pretty, and I have friends, and everything's wonderful for me. So surely when I get a little bit older, I am going to meet a nice young man who's going to be the nicest young man I could ever meet. And then we're going to fall in love and get married, and then we'll have a son who will be beautiful and wonderful, and he's going to grow up, and he's going to have a bar mitzvah, of course. But what if on the day of his bar mitzvah, he would clutch his head with a terrible headache and scream out, oh, my head, and fall over and die? Well, Elsie was so upset about her dead son that she started crying and weeping and wailing so loudly indeed that her mother came down. Elsie, my beautiful daughter, what's wrong? How can I help you? Oh, it's horrible. See, I'm going to get married, and I'm going to have a beautiful son, and he's going to have a bar mitzvah, and on the day of his bar mitzvah, he's going to squeeze his head and fall over and be dead. Well, the mother too was horrified. Her grandson, the light of her eyes, was dead. And so she sat down next to Elsie and started weeping and wailing and crying. So much so that Shmuley, their father, heard it and came down too. My beloved wife, my beloved daughter, what's wrong? How can I help you? Oh, you don't understand. It's the most horrible thing. You see, Elsie, our daughter, is going to get married to a wonderful young man, and then she's going to have a baby boy, our grandson. And on the day of his bar mitzvah, he's going to hold onto his head and say, oh my head, and fall down and be dead. Well, the father was horrified too, because this is also his grandson. And so he sat down, and now all three of them were weeping and wailing so loud indeed that the grandmother, who was very hard of hearing, why, it was loud enough that even she heard. And so she too came down, and it happened with her as it had with the rest. They talked about Elsie's marriage, the beautiful grandson, the day of his bar mitzvah, the horrible tragedy of the headache, and his horrible, youthful death. Well, this was the grandmother's great-grandson, who she hadn't even known if she would live to see her great-grandson, and now not only had she lived to see him, but she had outlived him. And so she too started weeping and wailing. And so throughout all of Chelm, the wailing grew louder until all of the neighbors had joined in about this terrible tragedy of Elsie's son and his untimely death. No one knew what to do. Finally the rabbi said, well, this is a time of great sorrow and great trouble. And in times of great sorrow and great trouble, there is nothing better to do but chant songs. So we should all chant songs. And so the entire city of Chelm started chanting songs to try and solve the problem of Elsie's son's untimely death. But there was one man, a miller, who was not from Chelm. He was from the outside world and had come and moved into Chelm. And as he sat there looking at all of this, he finally stood up and said something. Oh, good citizens of Chelm, I know that you are known throughout the world for your wisdom. Indeed, I have been astonished by the wisdom that I have seen in my time in Chelm. But although I am an outsider, I think I can help solve your problem. For you see, Elsa's great tragedy depends on some ifs. If she gets married, if she has a son, if on the day of his bar mitzvah he has a terrible headache, and if he dies from his terrible headache. That would indeed be a great tragedy. But you see, none of these things have happened yet. And because they haven't happened yet, they may never happen. Well, everyone in Chelm stopped to think about it. It was true. Elsa wasn't married yet. It was true. Elsa didn't have a son yet. So it was certainly true that Elsa's son hadn't been bar mitzvahed, and it was even more true that he hadn't clutched his head and died. And so they all stopped and were rejoiced to know that they were saved. There was no tragedy at all. And the rabbi, the great sage of Chelm, said, "You see, this is the power of chanting psalms." And so it is that everyone in Chelm agreed that any time they had a problem, they should chant psalms to solve it. And that is the tale of the wisdom